Welcome, everybody. This is another episode of Financial Advisors Want to Know. My name is Catherine Tindall. I'm one of the partners here at Dominion. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm that works for advisors. On today's episode, I have Joy Slaybaugh. She's a CFP with 20 years of financial planning experience, and that includes providing advice to multi-billion-dollar clients. She's also a licensed therapist, and Joy helps CFPs transform their wealth mindset and trains them advanced relationship skills to be able to do the same for their clients. So welcome to the show, Joy. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be with you and your audience, Catherine.
Yeah. So I actually saw a little video that you posted earlier today, and it really resonated with me about why do clients sometimes sabotage their finances and how can advisors address this? So it's something that I constantly see on the tax side, but I know for a lot of CFPs that we work with, this is a constant struggle of you put plans in place, but then there's psychological barriers that derail the plans. So what's your advice for advisors who are running into these issues of the clients kind of saying one thing and then doing the other and kind of trashing the work that you do?
Yeah, I think what I recommend to advisors is recognize that your clients have multiple parts of them that feel different ways. And that's actually normal. So when you're talking with them and they say, yes, I'm going to do this, then there is a part of them that really believes that and really feels that way. And there's a part of them that feels quite the opposite. And to recognize that and listen for it and look for it. And then when clients sabotage, it's like the part of them that doesn't want to do this will actually come up and be louder. So what we can do as advisors, as CPAs, is recognize that the first thing your client tells you is only part of the story. There is more to the story. So it's how do you create the space for those alternate points of view that your client probably has and welcome them in. Because once you get them to start talking about it, it's a whole lot easier than when it's this unspoken thing.
Yeah, that is a really great point. And I've noticed that myself in practice too, of just, you can sense the hesitation or you can sense that they say yes, but there's not a full yes there. That's great. And so I guess like the next piece is similar to that is that situation of when somebody is giving you a yes, but it's not really a yes, or they say they're going to do something and then they don't follow through. Yeah. What are your tips for advisors in trying to prevent this kind of behavior from happening or spotting it in the first place?
Yeah, so I really encourage people to build time into your meetings to check with any hesitancies, right? Sometimes you're right, they're going to give you that, yeah, we're going to do it. Sometimes it's a full-throated yes and they still never follow through. So build a time in that they say yes. It's like, okay, great, happy to hear that. Any concerns you have about it, any reason you're feeling that way right now, any reasons that you might not want to actually go forward with this in the future, like get that out in the open, but build the time in so that they can share it and you can welcome it. And, people often feel shame around money. And when they're coming to a professional who has all this experience, they're expecting to be judged and shamed, not consciously, but there's a certain level they expect to be judged and shamed. And so they want to, they want to follow your advice and they want to be seen as smart with money. So they want to agree with you. And so we have to be really deliberate and intentional about creating this psychological safety where we can hear the part of them that actually doesn't want to do that. Like, yeah, logically they get the Roth conversion makes a ton of sense. But there is this part of them that really balks at the idea of that tax bill and is like feeling some sticker shock. So how do you create the space and we talked about this makes sense. Any part of you that feels differently. And then maybe they're going to start with something soft. Welcome it in. Don't try to logic it away. Like welcome it in. Let them hear that. Pull more for it. And that's where you can go deeper and hear and actually find out these what these obstacles are and be with them in that. And then it's, again, we don't want to logic away because that just pushes this stuff under the surface where they'll pop out sideways with they're ignoring your calls. They maybe even go to a different advisor. We want to welcome this in, that it's here and present and we're talking about it and we're dialoguing. And it can also mean that maybe we adjust our timelines for when we expect something to be done. That if you're going to build in time in your meetings to hear obstacles, build in time in your timeline as well, that maybe there is some back and forth, and that's not failure. That's part of the process. And we're here to meet them where they are, welcome in the parts of them that want to do this, the parts of them that don't want to do this, and everything in between. And that we can hold that space for them as they process through that and eventually get to the outcomes they need.
Yeah, that's great. And I think another side question that comes up for me of something that I experience in my practice that goes along with this is, like, can you describe that process? Because you've got kind of two buckets of people, right? Where you've got people who are clients who are not following, where they have the trust, but there's some kind of block, versus people who aren't yet clients. And maybe, like, I've experienced this myself recently with somebody where it was a mental piece that was holding them back from executing on a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And they just needed time. And I knew early on in the conversations, and I told them, I said, I can sense that you need time to digest this.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to get this done for 3 months. So sit on it, talk to a couple other people. Here's what I'd recommend you do when you have those conversations. And then, we came back and were able to talk more about it. So if you have any advice or tips for advisors where they're not a client yet,
Mm-hmm.
and you're having those kinds of blocks, like, what are the best practices you've found for being able to spot that they do need the space, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to navigate that successfully for the prospective clients? Hey there, Catherine here. Thanks for listening to the conversation. Just wanted to explain a little more about what we do. So I'm a CPA here with Dominion. We're a tax firm that works specifically for financial advisors as they're growing and scaling their practices to help them avoid tax waste, make the right calls, and grow practices that they love. So if you're interested in saving more, you can DM me on LinkedIn with the word guide, and I'll send you over our guide for financial advisors to scale tax efficiently. All my top tips to unlock 6-figure savings. Thanks, and keep enjoying the show.
Yeah. I feel like it's really helpful for advisors to just recognize upfront that, again, people feel different ways about something at the same time, and that's healthy and normal. And so build time in to your process for this. And also even think about building your prospecting process to account for this, that you're not asking for the agreement. Like, it's not a 0 to 60 agreement all in, right? Very rarely are people if you think about the stages of change and the life cycle of change, like, very rarely are people coming to you 100% ready to sign. That almost never happens, right? They're somewhere earlier in the process, and you're part of your sales cycle, you're trying to get them to that point. What I encourage people is to build it in, like, normalize that with clients, that it is normal to feel a lot of different ways. Clearly, part of you wants this because you're here. It is also really normal that a part of you doesn't want to take action, and that is okay. And we can take our time working through this. And so what can be really helpful is when you're sensing that the client isn't fully on, or the prospect, isn't fully on board yet, don't ask for a decision, ask for a follow-up, right? Build in more time into your process so that you can be with them in this process. And sometimes what they just need is more time to welcome in their concerns and hesitations. And then they reach that decision and agreement. So it's a bit of a mindset shift for advisors. It's also a bit of changing the talk track for advisors about, like, normalizing this with clients. And then it's also a bit of a process change as well, of adjusting your process to account for being with people in moving through that cycle of change. We're not asking them to go off, move through the cycle of change alone, and then come back to us. We can be with them in that.
Yeah, that's great. And something that I like that I've heard people have a lot of success with is just, like you were saying, like, don't go 0 to 60. And if you can get people to do smaller engagements, smaller commitments, smaller things that they can agree to, so that you can build trust on that smaller level, then it's easier to go after the bigger requests, because they've got their toes in the water. They've worked, it's easier to work with people you've already worked with. And if there's a way for you to provide quick value with something that's a much smaller commitment from them, which is, a lot of people do those kind of initial assessments and things like that, where there's really no commitment. I've heard a lot of success from that. So when people are dealing with their own client situations and they're coming up against, you have the trust in the relationship, but it really is coming down to a mindset issue on the client side. And it's not that they don't trust you, it's just that there's a shift that needs to happen. And you can tell as the advisor that it's what's basically holding the relationship kind of at bay. What would be your advice for those advisors when they're meeting those mindset issues for clients, whether they should address it themselves and try to fix it themselves, or when it gets to the level of escalating it to referring out to another professional for dealing with some of that?
Yeah, so it really comes down to a couple things. One is, does the advisor have the skills, the time, and the willingness to do this work? Some advisors really love going deeper with their clients, beneath the surface, getting deeper into the emotional piece, into the mindset piece. They have that desire to do that, and they've invested in building the skills. It does take additional skills to do this. So for advisors who have the desire but not the skills, like, there are options that are out there that can help you build those skills. I am one of those options. For example, I have a program to help advisors build these advanced relationship skills that allow them to go deeper with their clients on mindset. So if you have the desire but not the skills, you can build them with a program like mine, or there's some others out there as well. And if your practice is structured, that you can go there. Because there's also a piece that some advisors, depending on their fee structure, they don't get compensated for this work, and that makes it feel more rushed, right? So if you don't have the time to do this work, then you may want to refer out, right? If you don't have the interest in doing the work, refer out. If you don't have the skills, refer out. If you don't have the capacity, refer out. The other thing I would say is, if you do have the time, you do have the skills, you do have the capacity, when you're encountering clients, though, when you are feeling a strong reaction inside of you working with this client, you want to refer out. Refer out, or get some additional support from you to help deal with what's happening inside of you as you encounter that client. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, then refer out. But so it really comes down to, how do advisors want to practice, how they want to show up with their clients, and where do they want to invest their education and building their skills deeper. So there's not really like one straight answer on this. It's a lot of it depends, which we know is the answer for every question that CFPs get asked.
Right. But I love how you framed that, though, of just know yourself first. Do you have the desire? Do you have the skills? And then, what's going on with the client? What level is it at? And then just triaging the situation, but start with yourself first. I think that's great advice, because I know for a lot of advisors, especially if they're more analytically minded, these things can be really challenging. And I think for a lot of them, instead of you trying to retool your strength, which is just being very, impartial and analytical, to try to retool that is not going to be as much of a benefit as if you can have these needs met maybe by somebody else on your team who's more empathetic, or just more able to make these like deeper human to human connections, and you stay in your lane on the analytical side. That's probably going to serve you better. But it just depends, right? It depends on what you want to do. Because I have the same thing for myself, where like I'm a very analytical and kind of impartial person, but I have a deep interest in improving this. And so even if it might not be the best ROI for me as a, entrepreneur running a business, I just want to develop the skill, period. So it just depends. But I like how you framed that there. So as we're getting ready to kind of wrap up, for advisors who are running into these issues with clients, I'd love to hear a little more about what you're doing, what you have for advice for resources for them, or ways that they can get, connected with you to learn more about the kind of work that you're doing with training in these skills.
Yeah. So I'll also suggest that if you are an analytical person and you don't want to do this work with the clients, build out some people you can refer to. A financial therapist, for example. I also provide financial therapy. So, this really is for advisors. If you don't want to do the work, you want to refer out. Okay. And there are other people like me that you can refer your clients to. We can meet with them for a period of time, help them resolve these things. And then they come back to you and they're easier to work with, frankly. There's also an option, though, if you want to build these skills. I also have a program to help advisors develop these advanced skills in a safe environment, so they're not testing and learning on their multi-million-dollar clients and making mistakes that could potentially jeopardize a lucrative relationship. And that you can build these skills yourself. So it really does come down to how do you want to operate and how do you want to show up with your clients. And there are options for you in both sides of that, whether you want to do it yourself or whether you want to have someone else partner with someone that they handle that for you. joyinliving.life is my website, and you can set up a brief conversation where we can talk about your client situation. I can share with you if I feel like I'm a good fit, or if not, where would I suggest, where can I recommend that you go? And if you'd like to build these skills, I have a website, financialconflictresolutioncenter.com, where that lays out this program and what the process is like for you to build these skills. So really is like, depending on where you are, how you want to operate, you've got a lot of options available to you. And I'm happy to meet and support advisors where they are in that journey.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Joy, for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate your insights here and the work that you're doing for CFPs.
Thanks, Catherine.